Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the JMO Podcast. I'm your host, Tayler Michels, and we've got Dennis Kassube on the line this week. Dennis is a fishing enthusiast. His influence in the fishing industry can be tracked back to the early days of the Dave Gantz Fish Trap Fish House when Dennis became a dealer out of his garage. Super fun story there. In this episode, Dennis covers his recipe for success for first ice walleyes in northeast South Dakota. Make sure to visit our Facebook and Instagram pages at Jason Mitchell Outdoors to recommend a guest or a topic for an upcoming episode of the JMO Podcast.
Hello.
Dennis.
Hey, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
Good.
Dennis, talk a little bit about, or I want to get you to maybe talk a little bit about where you're from and some of your home bodies of water and some of the things that you've done in the industry in the past.
Sure. Well, I grew up in central Minnesota. My grandfather put me in a boat when I was 3 years old. He is a very renowned walleye fisherman in Minnesota, and I ended up growing up on lakes such as Big Pine, Ottertail, Meltona Net. I never even really realized that he fished basically at night, my grandfather did, and I never realized people fished in the daytime till I was about 12 years old. So work-wise, I moved to South Dakota, the northeast corner, in the late 80s. And we have lived in the northeast corner of South Dakota since then. So how lucky was I that I happened to hit the big boom of northeast South Dakota, such as the Walleyes, the lakes like that. How lucky was I to hit that boom and live here at that time. We lived on Big Stone for almost 30 years, and then 2 years ago we moved up to Lake Traverse. So that's pretty much the history of where I've lived. I've been fortunate enough to fish all over the upper Midwest and Canada, and very fortunate to be able to fish with some of, if not the best fishermen that ever walked. So quite lucky in that respect. So.
And kind of focusing on some of the ice fishing, you've done a lot of really cool projects, ice fishing over the years. I mean, in my time working with Jason Mitchell, we've done some stuff together. What have been some of your fun memories ice fishing in this industry?
Well, probably growing up on the ice was incredible to me that I got to do it so much. But back in, and really, time really flies, but golly, late 90s, early 2000, when Clam Corp came out with the fish traps, no one in our area sold fish traps. So I contacted them and asked if I could get a dealership, which at that time they were more than happy to give to me. And at that time, they had two fish houses to choose from. The original Dave Gantz fish trap, and then they had one that was a two-man. Oh, gosh, I can't remember for sure what the name of that was. But anyhow, you had two fish houses to choose from is all. And the first year out of my garage, I sold like 45 of them. And then the next year, which I was different than your big box stores because I assembled them. Well, I got so good at assembling them, I could put one together in less than a half an hour. So through all that, of course, since Dave Gantz was, pretty much running the company almost, I got to know Dave very well. And then through that, him and I have become dear friends. Matter of fact, I'll be heading down there next week so him and I can hang out and spend a day fishing. And we try to do that 2, 3, 4 times a year just to get caught up on everything, explain ideas, and, to be able to rub elbows with a gentleman as nice, as kind as Dave Gantz is just a complete honor. So that was kind of one of my fondest memories of ice fishing, is to be start with that deal and then end up to have a friend as good as Dave Gentz. So
There's something going on over there this year. Isn't this like the 40th anniversary of that fish trap being sold through Clam?
yes, Clam Corp is coming, or Clam Outdoors, excuse me, I should call it Clam Outdoors, is coming out with 3 limited editions for the 40th anniversary. One of them is the original, and if you ever got to see a picture of the original, one of the very original fish traps, or see it in person, it's really cool. And actually, if you went to stop at Clam Outdoors at Rogers, right by Cabela's, on I-94, you would get to see one of the first 5 ever made. Somehow, and I don't know the gentleman's name, but somehow a guy put his away, and it somehow, like, mice never got to it. It didn't deteriorate, and it looks like it was just built. So they have that on display. So it was a very white, odd, off-white color. So the new edition, the 3 that are coming out, it would be the original Fish Trap Scout, and it would be the Kenai, and I think also the Yukon will be the new ones that will be coming out with the 40th anniversary edition. They're really cool. They look cool. If anyone is interested in getting one, I would suggest that you get a hold of your dealer and get it as fast as you can, because when they're sold out, they're gone and they won't be made again. So, yeah, pretty cool.
Tapering off from that into some of this early ice stuff. Dennis, you've been in the ice fishing industry. You've been participating in it for a lot of years. Early ice every year, that's highly anticipated for everybody. I can only imagine you get excited every year to get on the ice for the first time. What are some of the things that pop into your head right away when you think early ice? What is early ice to you?
Well, really, I think occasionally I'll be on in this country and at Thanksgiving time, because you got to realize we got so many bodies of water in northeast South Dakota, and a lot of them have a maximum depth of like 6 feet or 8, depending on the water level, maybe 10-foot maximum depth. So they freeze over pretty quick. So then, you can, it's a lot of times, for sure the 1st of December, we're creeping out on some of that stuff. And then a good thing to remember, the smaller the body of water, the earlier in the year you want to fish it. As winter goes on, I'm thinking the oxygen levels will deplete in those, and the fish will get less dormant, being less aggressive. As winter goes on, you, of course, want to go to bigger and bigger bodies of water all the time, such as like even end up on something like Devil's Lake. So we do get on fairly early. There's several things that I look for, and I watch, and I'm of the age that I grew up a lot watching what happened with nature. And these are a lot of things that my grandfather taught me, even though, this was a long time ago, but that nature a lot of times doesn't change a lot. So basically, there's some things that you want to watch and prepare for. Number one would be with the fantastic clothing that we have available to us, whether it be footwear, headwear, or for your body. Such as bibs and jacket. You're able to be out in the elements, no matter what. So you fish later and later and later in the year. It used to be years ago, I could tell how good the pheasant population was, because if there was a fairly decent pheasant population, there would be absolutely no one on the lakes. If there was a really good pheasant population, there would be people on the lake by 3, 4 in the afternoon, because they'd already gotten their birds. And if there was no pheasants around, it took them all day, so I'd never seen anybody at all. So, there's a lot of things in nature that you can watch and predict and see what's going to happen with the fishing. So number one, if I may, how many times have you drove by a lake in the fall and noticed the highway is absolutely covered with frogs? Well, they're going into the lake to winter, and believe me, those walleyes will be there with the feed bag on, and as soon as it freezes over, those walleyes will be in that vicinity. They love to go along and dig frogs out of the mud in the wintertime. Many walleyes I've caught in the wintertime, you can actually see the mud on their lower jaws and stuff where they've been digging. Another one to watch is if you have the right lake and you have a creek that goes in and out of that lake, or a small river. In that small river or creek, you'll have what would be either creek chubs or sucker minnows, or maybe lake shiners will be in that creek. As soon as that water starts to get X amount of degrees, which would be, almost in that pheasant hunting time, it starts to get pretty chilly. If you'll notice, as you walk along those creeks, and I go out and hand catch all my own creek chubs for fall fishing with hook and line. It's something that Dave Gentz taught me. And anyhow, all of a sudden, those creek chubs are all gone. Where did they go? You can walk up miles of that thing and you will not find one. What they've done is they've migrated back into the lakes. And believe me, there's two things that fish do. They want to eat and they want to reproduce, and that's all they got to do. So if all them creek chubs, river shiners, whatever they might do, migrate back into these, where these creeks either enter or come out of a lake, when they enter, those fish will be there as soon as it freezes up. Matter of fact, you might want to be at those places before freeze up casting at night. So
let's keep going into that. Spots. If you've narrowed down a few bodies of water, whether they're your local spots that you go to every year, or you're going to a new body of water and you're using some of that philosophy, you're kind of investigating your surroundings, getting below the surface of the ice, what are some of these spots looking like? What is kind of the recipe for success when it comes to early ice?
Well, number one thing would be that, in my mind, and of course, you got to realize how long I've done all this. A spot that's good in the fall will usually, and I don't broadcast where I fish. I mean, that's obvious, because of today's fishing world, there's a lot of people and they want to fish and they want to catch fish, But a spot where you've caught walleyes, like I said, where these creek chubs go back in, where these frogs migrate to, they will always be good. So, once you get what would you call it, like a meat run, you'll always have that. Now, if I was going to go somewhere and ice fish, one of the things that I look at every year, as soon as I can get it, is the fall test net results from the DNRs, because they all do them. And when you can get your hands on them, because I really don't care how good a fisherman you are. You can't catch fish unless you're there. I don't care what lure you have. I don't care what you have. If there aren't any fish there, you aren't going to catch them. So the number one thing to do would be look at the test net results of different lakes, see where the best numbers are of decent sized fish, and go from there. So when you look at a lake map, I would be looking for bottom changes. I'd be looking on the north side of the lake. Normally, that's the very warmest water when it freezes over, but it all depends on, is there a spot where frogs could come in? Is there a spot where the creek chubs could come in? That would be what I'd be looking at pretty intensely.
Just to kind of speak to that, do you kind of just go in every year with an open mind in terms of just finding that fertile water or that area and then dialing them in year to year versus day to day?
Well, a good example of that would be, a lot of times you'll hear guys that are really mad when the ice gets thick enough, let's say 10 to 12 inches, that people start to drive on it, because there's a coincidence, and it is just a coincidence, that all of a sudden, once people drive on it, fish are gone. My point of view on that is, number one, they probably caught them all right in that area. Number two is, when that ice gets so thick, the water temperature underneath the ice changes, which moves the bait fish in the aquatic life, which moves the fish. And that's the timing is just about exactly right on. When the ice thickness is thick enough to drive on is when your bait fish will take a big move and, of course, take the fish with them. So, we get a lot of times, I think we get a lot of times down here, where we'll get a little ice and then it kind of piddles around, and it might take 2-3 weeks before we, even though we have a little ice, that we can walk on it. Shoot, was it last year or the year before? I can't remember. When we finally could get going and make and cover water and and catch fish, those fish were almost in their midwinter spots already because the ice was so crappy that we couldn't, other than get out a tiny ways, we couldn't cover water. And so a lot would depend on how it freezes up too in our area. But no, you always got to go in with an open mind. You don't want to fish memories. I mean, you got to look at what's going on. How much ice do we got? Wind direction in the winter, in my mind, plays a major. I think personally, wind direction in the wintertime could be more important than open water. So you use your lake maps. You look at see we got an inside turn. I want that wind coming into that, just like in the summertime. You would, if you were fishing that inside turn, you'd be in the boat, you'd have the wind to your back, fishing that. In the wintertime, you keep an eye on that because that's huge. You take a long lake, such as, let's use Big Stone for an example. Let's say that now that lake doesn't lay north and south exactly, but let's use that as a reference. If we had a prevailing north wind for 3 or 4 days, it literally, even with the ice on the top of it, would push a lot of that water down the other direction. It moves it. How many times have you been out ice fishing and you're looking in the water in your holes going up and down, up and down? So visualize that you got a rock pile out there, and visualize you're an old style washing machine going agitating. Basically, that's taking all that aquatic life on those rock piles and pushing it right down to the edge. And then on the bottom of that rock pile, most of the time in this country, will be a foot or 2 or maybe 3, maybe 4 foot of hard bottom, and then it will go into soft bottom or basin. And I'm telling you right now, that stretch right there, where that aquatic life is pushed down to that edge, and there's a hard area before it turns soft, is just like a super highway for fish. And how I know that, I've watched hours and hours with camera and watched them coming through. It's unbelievable. Every fish in that area will use that type of stuff. Does that have anything to do with early ice? No, not really, but it does have something to do with ice fishing, I'll tell you that much. So.
The JMO Podcast is sponsored by Long Haul Trucking. Long Haul's always looking for more skilled professional CDL drivers to join their team. They're a people-first company, and it shows. Their employee-owned, asset-based fleet of over 350 Conestogas is among industry leaders in pay and benefits geared towards long-term success and growth for company drivers and owner-operators. If you're a professional driver or a company that wants to ship product with the best in the business, get a hold of Long Haul at 1-800-255-5153 or find them online at longhaultrucking.com. Long Haul, running on the power of promises kept. Sure. And with the variety of lakes down in your neck of the woods, it's easy to imagine that there's plenty of fish that are probably doing multiple things. Not every single fish is doing the same thing in the exact same depth. But do you have any philosophy in terms of that early ice time period, in terms of finding fish spread out? Do you kind of have a decision-making process when it comes to on any particular given lake or whatever example works for you for finding big fish versus maybe kind of the more eater-sized fish? Or do you typically find them mixed in? I mean, what's that like for you early ice?
Well, I'll tell you what, a few years ago or 4 years ago, it might have been something like that. My youngest son, Corey, and I got into a batch of big walleyes. They were big. This was right before freeze up. So my goal was that I wanted to follow that school of big walleyes. And it froze over, and I was able to chase them for 2 weeks hard, and I never found them. So To just go out and catch big fish is just hard to do, you know. Well, what would I look for? Of course, you got the number one, if I was to look for it, would be where the frogs migrated into, would be an excellent place. But to just literally go out and find and look for big fish, yeah, that's pretty hard to do. Actually, I had a guy, if I may, I had a guy come up to me at one of the shows I was doing, and luckily I get to do a lot of them, for clam and pure fishing and that. And I had a guy come up to me and he says, he says, I just never can catch any big perch. And I asked him where he fished. And I did happen to know a touch about that particular body of water. And I says, well, I said, let's call him Joe. I said, Joe, he says, you're never going to catch any big perch in there. Well, he says, I can't catch them. I said, well, they're not there. So number one, if you want to catch a big walleye, you got to go to a body of water that's got big fish. Number two is if you're catching fish like, let's say that you're in an area and they progressively seem to get a little smaller. They get a little smaller. They get a little smaller. You got to get out of there if you're after a big fish, because it may seem crazy, but normally the first fish you will catch will be your biggest ones. They seem to be the most aggressive. They seem to be like the king of the hill. And a lot of times, let's say it's in the first day or two or first morning or first evening, there's a lot of spots on a lot of these lakes. If you can catch one walleye, two walleyes, maybe three walleyes in the evening, you want to be there before it gets light in the morning, because they will probably be piled in there. So,
let's get into some of the methods. You talk about obviously early ice, variable ice depth. So you're out there, you're pulling your sled, you're pulling your one man, and you got your 6-inch cage reel. You've got your favorite rod or two and your Vexlar. What is kind of the list of must-haves in terms of fishing gear, and then getting out there using it? I mean, what's in your tackle box? What's your arsenal look like, and how do you plan to go through over the course of a day when you're hunting down fish early ice?
Well, and a very exciting thing, and luckily I'm able to be using them right now, is Clam came out with what's called the Tikka Minnow. And it is a jigging swim bait or swimming jigging lure for walleyes and panfish. They come in an 1/8 ounce and on up to 5/8 ounce. There's 4 different ones. I think there's 14 different color combinations. They are beautiful, and they will be released here very, very soon to the public. And that is the type of lure that I basically fish. When you use a type of lure like a Tikka Minnow, till you get a lot of confidence in it, I would suggest that you would have a center treble hook on it. I would suggest that you tip it with a minnow head. The treble hook, put a minnow head on the treble hook until you get a lot of confidence in it. And then a lot of times you may want to, but you don't really need to tip it with anything. And I just maybe I use them too much, but they sure do work. So I'm able to fish fast. And when a fish comes after that type of lure, there's no wondering if you're getting a bite. I mean, they a lot of times will try to take the rod right out of your hand. Of course, you got to realize too, we're only fishing 5, 6, 7 foot of water a lot of the time. That type of lure, you're looking for aggressive fish. And with my personality, I'm not one to sit around and wait for things. So that's why my arsenal would be number one. I'd have 2 or 3 different sizes, several colors. You always got faith in one color. That's maybe what you start with. Remember one thing when you're fishing, whether it be open water or frozen water, hard water, if you don't have confidence in the area you're fishing, if you don't have confidence in what you're fishing with, if you don't have any confidence in all in what you're doing, you might be better off to go home and clean your garage. Because, I mean, if confidence is huge on whether you're going to catch fish or not. I mean, it's just huge. You should go out there with, Michael Jordan didn't go out to play basketball wondering if he was going to score a basket. I mean, he knew he was. It was just how many was he going to score, So always remember that. But I would say, so that would be my number one type of lure. Actual jigging spoon is always good. And then any style of jig is always good, depending on the mood of the fish, is what you got to adjust to. Sometimes they want to chase, sometimes they want to look. We also came out with a new bait this year, Clam will be releasing, called the Silky. And what the Silky is it's actually made out of all natural silk, and it's a tipper for a jig. I'm kind of excited to actually use them on maybe the Tikka Minnow on that treble hook. But to see them, I've got to use them, and to see them in the water, that Silky is going to be a game changer for a lot of things. I would guesstimate, you put that on a jig, small jig for panfish, let's say, and you put that Silky on and hung maybe 2 spikes. I mean, heck, it would be just absolutely deadly. And then as the evening gets a little later, just put more and more spikes on. Pretty soon you got enough on that if a walleye goes by, you catch him anyhow. So, but yeah, 2 of the most exciting things that I think are going to happen through the ice this winter will be the Tikka Minnow and the Silky. They're going to be just gangbusters. So,
talk a little bit about, or keep going into your gear selection. I mean, when you're fishing, you kind of established, you're an aggressive guy. You don't hang around. You fish pretty fast. I mean, just go a little deeper into the method of your madness in terms of how much time you spend and why you select, the line and the leader line and the rod and things like that.
Sure. Well, let's back up a touch, if you don't mind, and let's go back to the fish trap. The fish trap empty weighs about 45 pounds. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make is ice fishing is they take away their mobility. Even if they buy a fish trap, they load it down. They got 7 pails. They got this. They got that. I mean, there's just too much stuff. But if you've ever seen, or everyone that's ever seen I tweak out all my own fish traps, whether it be whichever one I'm running it's all tweaked out with everything. So basically, if you can visualize this, if you were setting in a fish trap, I always mount my Vexilars right to the fish trap. So if I was sitting in the seat and my feet were on the ice, there's a small ram mount coming out of the base of the fish trap with my Vexilar mounted right on it, right between my legs, okay? And then all I need is a battery. So then the battery is in the battery holder in the fish trap. And then as long as I'm there, I might as well put in a light bar. So then I put the light bar in, and that way I'm able to see and everything. So, do I fish outside all the time? No, because I'm able to stand up, flip my lid, pull my fish trap, drill a hole, flip the lid back down. And I think there's a lot to be said to be in the cover of a small shelter like that, where your movements would not be detected from down below quite as well. So basically, I'm ready to go. I flip the lid. I pull my transducer out of the water. I lay it in my fish trap. I grab it. I've already got my K-drill in my hand, and I walk, a ways. How many holes would I drill? It depends on the fishing. If you got fish, you start to concentrate. If you've done your homework and looked at the area you're going to fish, I've seen so many people come out, and 2 guys will get out and they'll drill 100 holes, and they'll fish like 5 or 6 or maybe 10, maybe even 20 of them, and away they'll go. And I thought, we sure drilled a lot of holes for nothing there. I see that all the time when I'm on the ice. So let's say that I've gotten to my fishing area. My rod choices are going to be probably 26s, 28s, or 30-inch, and they would be in medium light to medium. I would probably run, I'd probably have 1, maybe 2 rods rigged up with 6-pound mono, and then 1 or 2 rods probably rigged up. Now, if we were fishing for walleyes, of course, 1 or 2 rods rigged up with with 6-pound super line. So
essentially, you rig up your setup so that you're really efficient. Both, just in your weight, you're not dragging so much, you're not wearing yourself out dragging that thing around. It flips over, you stand up and you're on the go, and also just trimming your gear down. I mean, there's going to be a time where you can take your snowmobile or pickup out. You're going to cover more water, might be going after multiple species in a day, and then you can bring all your stuff. But I think that early season, and we'll call it early ice, not so much early season, because, as you said, some of them smaller lakes are going to go first, and, you can fish them for a few weeks. And then the bigger bodies of water, some of the back bays start freezing over, and you might have been ice fishing for a month before you get out on a bigger body of water. Well, it's early ice for that body of water then, so you kind of stay that early ice season. Especially, talking about that neck of the woods, that northeast South Dakota, it's almost like that early ice lasts a long time depending upon what body of water you're on. So it's kind of, it's cool to just have that arsenal kind of dialed in, and you're just really efficient. You get off work, you can throw it in the back of your pickup, and you're on your way.
Yeah, and and then make it easier too is basically. And Jason and I both do this because I've been with him where I've seen him doing the same thing I am. I take a small Ziploc bag and I put a whole bunch of minnow heads in there. I mean, I don't need to carry minnows because I'm not going to stop long enough to soak a minnow. All I need is the head to tip a bait. And a lot of times with today's lures, you don't even need to tip a bait, but it does give me a little more confidence. So I'd have to say that probably 75% of the time I'm tipping. And keeping yourself mobile where it's easy to move, you will move a lot more. I mean, if you got to pick up a bunch of pails and gather this up and gather that up. And, I see guys go out and they'll put out a tip up and then they'll fish there a little bit, and then they'll want to move. Well, now they got to walk over and pick that tip up. That's not something that I do, but I'm sure, if they want to do that, that's great. It just would slow me down way, way too much. So.
Oh yeah, it takes all kinds, and that's so true in the fishing community. You just go ice fishing on a popular lake, and you'll see so many different cultures of people in action at one time.
And something, I mean, most of them all catch fish, so that's the good thing.
Maybe let's get into some ice safety a little bit. What are some of the tips and tricks to early ice season safety from you, Dennis?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one is, if I may, they're predicting there will be more ice fishermen this winter because of everything that's went on. No different than more summer fishermen this summer campers, and that they predict the summer or winter ice fishing will be the biggest ever. What scares me about that is, as we get more and more new people to this sport, I actually see people walking around on early ice like they're walking on a safe city street. I mean, it scares me a little bit that they don't realize how ice actually works. Am I perfect? No, because I can tell you a lot of stories how I went through. And then with the equipment we have nowadays, believe me, I have it on. Now, number one thing you can do usually is, if you're walking, you can usually look ahead and see how thick the ice a lot of times is by the cracks. If there isn't any snow and it was a nice freeze up, which would be a perfect world, wouldn't it? But if there, and then it cracks and you can see like there's 4 or 5 inches of ice by the crack. Another thing is that you should always, on early ice, you should always have a spud, at least the first time you walk out there, and then be pounding on it, and see how many chisels or how thick it is. Basically, the little K drill, 6-inch drill so fast, and that's what I use. I just and then move ahead and I can see how thick it is. So that's what I do. But safety. Well, let's get back to clam. They have 2 suits. The one is the Rise, which would be the entry level pricing, very reasonably priced to get the bibs the bibs and the jacket. And the other one is the scent, and that is your more premium grade product. They both come with the same flotation and they both work great. So let's say that you had those. The other thing you got to make sure that you have are spikes. Lots of companies make them and have them around your neck. I always wear mine. Matter of fact, I pretty much, if I'm running around in my UTV out on the ice, I always have mine around my neck because, I mean, you might think you're pretty cool, but if you ever tried to scratch out a smooth ice, you are not, your fingernails aren't going to cut it, man. I mean, if you do happen to go in. So that would be some of the things that I would recommend. If nothing else, put a life jacket on. I've seen guys out there, they're out there with their family. He's went to Shields and bought himself a nice flotation suit, ice suit, and then there's lots of brands. There's lots of good ones. I just happen to prefer the clam. And here his kids come behind them without that. Well, if nothing else, put life jackets on the kids, if nothing else. And all the companies make youth models. So what the heck, get them that for Christmas. They got a really nice jacket that they can wear when it's cold, bibs when it's cold. Plus, when you do take them fishing, they have the best safety equipment there is. So another thing that I think we should point out is creepers, spikes, whatever you want to call them. There's nothing slipperier than this early ice, especially in this country. If there's no snow, you've got wind. If it froze up smooth, the wind will move some sand or fine particles across the ice. And I mean, I've literally seen people get knocked out that wipe out. There's a lot of good creepers, spikes, whatever you want to assist, for your boots on the market. And then, use them, put them on and use them, because it'll just make your day that much enjoyable if you aren't slipping and sliding around. So,
talking about sports shows, what are some of the, that time of year, what are some of the trendy products, just year in and year out over the course of your career that have just kind of come and stayed? It's kind of that first purchase every year, those kind of those bang for your buck investments, and maybe even, along those same lines, just the questions, what are some of the trendy questions that you hear from people at those sports shows? So what are some of the questions that you're always answering and the conversations that you're always having around that same time that we haven't already touched on?
Number one, the very, very first question you always get is what's new. But I do think that one of the coolest things that I've seen is the progress or the maturity, however you'd say it, of the ice augers. I mean, that is mind-boggling. In 1969, my dad bought me my very first gas auger. And now we've gotten to where, gee whiz, with the K-drill and the Milwaukee fuel, there's no weight. And then you put the clam bracket on that it makes it actually into an auger, where you're actually holding it like a regular auger, and there's no weight to it, and they drill like lightning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the technology has just come a long ways, and, with everything, like you say, I mean, it's hard to imagine that anything else could be either improved upon exponentially or that anything new could ever come in, but every year it just is, and that's probably what fuels that passion when people do come to those sports shows. It's just buzzing because that expectation is just so high from everybody. It's just that there's gonna be some cool stuff here. They want to get their hands on it, they want to see it, they want to touch it. I mean, if you were to say the average the average modern day ice fisherman anymore probably has a flasher or something along those lines, has a couple of rods, and puts fresh line on every year, and has a kind of a modest tackle box, and has one for everybody in the family. What are some of the better bang for your buck investments? What should somebody save up for to really beef up their arsenal? I know you've already talked a lot about those electric augers. Is that kind of one of them things, or is there some other ones?
the cool part about ice fishing is to get set up to do it could be a lot less money than if you and I tried to set up for a summer with a boat. I mean, it'd be incredible. I think if I was a young couple and I had a family and they wanted to participate, and let's be very glad they do. That is the future of this business, is those youngsters coming up. And I'll tell you what, in the last couple, 2-3 years, I'm very, very impressed with how the quality of these youngsters and how good they fish. It's mind-boggling how fast. Well, just think, how fast do you think they can pick up on using a flasher or a liquid crystal or a Markham or something like that when they run video games all the time?
Yeah, it's almost like they were built for it.
Yeah, that's second nature to them. You don't even have to tell them what's going on, and they're on the deal. We're actually going to put together if everything goes right, a youth fishing deal on Traverse this year, and I've been asked to help with that, and I'm quite excited. With that, Clam is gonna. I need to get a date set so that I can get it reserved. But Clam will allow me to use their trailer that's full of the hub style fish houses. So, getting back to my wife and I, let's say, and our young family, we want to ice fish. Well, gee whiz, you can get into the very best hub that Clam makes for about under $400. Now, I'm talking a super thick insulated product that folds up, would go back in the back of the SUV if that's what you have. Definitely would lay in the back of a pickup. So you get that, you get yourself a Mr. Heater, you get yourself a K-drill, couple flashers, and some warm clothes for the kids. Make sure that you keep their feet warm. A lot of kids nowadays move so fast, I don't think that their feet would ever get cold. But so then, like I was saying, you're pretty much set up to go tackle anything. That's what I would look at, would be a hub.
Perfect. All right. Let's put an ending on this some which way. We'll do it again down the road sometime, and we'll meet up on the ice hopefully this year or whenever it works out. And but in the meantime, I'll let you back at it, man.
All righty, buddy. Thank you.